When a seasoned wildlife photographer spotted a grizzly bear moving through the snowy Alaskan wilderness, he expected to capture nature's harsh reality. Instead, he witnessed an extraordinary event that defied natural instincts and challenged our understanding of animal consciousness. This remarkable encounter sparked a global shift in how we perceive wildlife, proving that nature's most profound revelations come from rare, unfiltered moments. It was minus 30 degrees when Thomas stepped out of his cabin that morning. His breath froze instantly in the air. With over 20 years of experience in Alaska's wilderness, Thomas believed he had seen it all. He was wrong. As the sun cast purple and gold hues over the snowy expanse, he adjusted his camera gear and ventured into the still, frozen landscape. Reports of unusual animal activity had brought him here. The only sound was the crunch of his boots on fresh snow, and an eerie sense of anticipation hung in the air. Then he saw the tracks, massive bear tracks, impossibly fresh during a time when bears should be in hibernation. His heart raced as he documented the prints. Was the bear sick? Injured? Every scientific paper he had ever written said this shouldn't be possible. The tracks led him deeper into the dense forest, where the heavy silence and faint morning light created an almost otherworldly atmosphere. Thomas's mind raced to catalog every detail, not knowing he was about to uncover a discovery that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about wildlife behavior.
But nothing in his extensive experience could have prepared him for what he was about to see. A sound stopped him in his tracks. Not the fearsome growl he might have expected, but something else entirely. Something that made him question whether his ears were playing tricks on him. It sounded almost like crying. Thomas raised his camera, his fingers trembling slightly despite his thick gloves. The tracks led around a massive pine tree, and as he carefully peered around it, the sight before him made him forget every scientific protocol he had ever learned. His camera nearly slipped from his grasp as he struggled to comprehend what he was witnessing. There, in a small clearing ahead, stood the largest grizzly bear he had ever seen. But it wasn't the bear's size that made Thomas's breath catch in his throat. It was what the bear was doing that would change everything he thought he knew about these magnificent creatures. The massive grizzly stood near a frozen pond, its breath creating clouds in the frigid air. Thomas had photographed hundreds of bears throughout his career, but something about this one's behavior seemed fundamentally different. Instead of the aggressive, hungry stance he expected from a bear awakened during winter, this one moved with careful, almost deliberate movements. Its powerful paws, each equipped with claws that could easily tear through thick hide, worked with surprising delicacy at something in the snow. Through his telephoto lens, Thomas watched in growing amazement. The bear was focused intently on what appeared to be a dark shape, half buried in a snowdrift. As the morning light grew stronger, Thomas could finally make out what had caught the bear's attention. There, nearly invisible against the white landscape, lay a young moose calf. It couldn't have been more than a few months old, likely separated from its mother during the previous night's brutal storm. Thomas's hands trembled as he steadied his camera. Everything he knew about bear behavior told him to prepare for the inevitable. He had documented predator-prey interactions countless times before, and a helpless calf would make an easy meal for a hungry bear awake in winter. His finger hovered over the shutter button, ready to capture nature's harsh reality. But what happened next would forever change his understanding of wildlife behavior. The bear began carefully clearing snow away from the calf, its movements so gentle they seemed impossible for such a powerful predator. Each sweep of its massive paw was calculated, precise, almost surgical in its care. Thomas could hardly believe what he was seeing through his viewfinder. As the bear worked, it positioned its bulk to shield the calf from the bitter wind that whipped through the trees. The temperature had dropped well below zero during the night, and the calf showed only minimal signs of life. Yet the bear persisted in its rescue efforts, using its own body heat to warm the half-frozen creature. Thomas watched in astonishment as the bear even used its tongue to stimulate circulation in the calf's limbs, just as a mother bear would do with her own cubs. Minutes stretched into an hour as Thomas documented every extraordinary moment. His fingers had gone numb from cold, but he barely noticed. The young moose began showing more signs of life under the bear's patient care. First a twitch of its ears, then stronger movements of its head. The bear remained calm and consistent in its efforts, occasionally making soft rumbling sounds that carried clearly in the still morning air. Thomas's mind raced with the implications of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just unusual behavior, it was revolutionary. Everything he had learned about predator-prey, relationships, everything written in scientific literature about bear behavior was being challenged by what was unfolding before him. This was conscious choice. This was empathy. This was something that would force science to reevaluate its entire understanding of animal consciousness. After nearly 2 hours of care, the bear's efforts began showing real results. The calf managed to lift its head, then struggled to fold its legs under itself. The bear watched attentively, occasionally offering gentle nudges of encouragement with its nose. When the calf finally attempted to stand, Thomas felt tears freezing on his cheeks. He had never witnessed anything so remarkable in all his years studying wildlife. But nature had one more surprise in store. A sound echoed through the trees, a sound that made both Thomas and the bear pause. The distinctive call of a female moose searching for her lost calf carried across the clearing. Thomas expected the bear to flee or perhaps finally show aggression. Instead, he witnessed something even more extraordinary. The bear slowly backed away from the calf, creating a deliberate space between them. Its behavior showed clear intention, an understanding of the situation that spoke of intelligence far beyond what science have attributed to these creatures. Through his lens, Thomas captured every incredible moment as the mother moose emerged from the tree line. The next few minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. The mother moose approached cautiously, torn between maternal instinct and fear of the bear. The bear maintained its distance, keeping its head low in what almost appeared to be a submissive posture. It was communication between species that defied every conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. Thomas's camera shutter clicked rapidly as he documented the reunion. The mother moose reached her calf, who had managed to stay standing on shaking legs. As the pair reconnected, the bear remained nearby, watching with what Thomas could only describe as apparent satisfaction. Only when the calf successfully began nursing did the bear finally turn and amble slowly back into the forest, leaving tracks in the snow that would lead to a complete reimagining of what we thought we knew about wildlife. The journey back to his cabin felt surreal to Thomas. His hands still shook as he carefully stored his camera equipment, knowing he carried evidence of something that would challenge the very foundations of wildlife science. The bear's tracks in the snow were already beginning to fade, but the impact of what he had witnessed would soon spread far beyond this frozen wilderness. That evening, Thomas spent hours reviewing his photographs. Each image told part of an incredible story. Frame after frame showed the deliberate care the bear had taken with the moose calf. He carefully documented everything while the memory was still fresh, writing detailed notes about the bear's behavior, its body language, and every small gesture that spoke of conscious decision-making. Sleep eluded him that night. His mind kept returning to the moment when the bear first approached the calf. According to everything he knew about predator behavior, everything written in textbooks and scientific journals, what he had witnessed should have been impossible. Bears were supposed to be driven by instinct, by the simple equations of hunger and survival. Yet this bear had shown something more, something that hinted at a depth of consciousness that science had never acknowledged in these creatures. The next morning, Thomas made his first call to Dr. Sarah Henderson at the Wildlife Behavior Institute. Her initial skepticism turned to stunned silence as he described what he had witnessed. "Send me everything," she said finally, her voice trembling with excitement. "Every photo, every note. This could change our entire understanding of predator behavior." Within days, Thomas's discovery began creating waves in the scientific community. Researchers who had spent decades studying bears found themselves questioning long-held beliefs. The photographs spread through academic circles, accompanied by heated debates about animal consciousness and the implications for wildlife research. The first major conference call included wildlife experts from 3 continents. As Thomas shared his screen and walked them through the sequence of events, the usual academic restraint gave way to unbridled excitement. These were scientists who had built careers on the assumption that large predators operated purely on instinct. Now they were seeing evidence that suggested something far more complex. Local wildlife officials began reporting similar observations from other areas. It seemed that once people knew what to look for, they started finding more examples of unexpected behavior in predator species. A wolf pack in Montana had been observed guiding lost hikers back to a trail. A mountain lion in California had been spotted sharing its kill with a hungry coyote. While none of these incidents matched the clear documentation of Thomas's bear encounter, they suggested a pattern that had gone unnoticed for generations. Conservation groups seized upon the discovery. The story of the bear and the moose calf became a powerful symbol for their cause. If these creatures are capable of such compassion, they argued, how can we continue to treat them as mindless beasts? Support for wildlife protection programs surged as people began viewing large predators in a new light. The media attention grew steadily. At first, it was just scientific journals and nature magazines. Then mainstream news outlets picked up the story. Thomas found himself doing interviews, carefully explaining what he had seen and what it might mean for our understanding of wildlife. He was determined to present the facts without sensationalism, to let the bear's actions speak for themselves. Universities began updating their wildlife biology curricula. The incident became a case study in animal behavior courses. Students who had once memorized simple stimulus response patterns in predators now engaged in complex discussions about animal consciousness and emotional capacity. The bear in the snow had become a catalyst for a new way of thinking about wildlife.
Research priorities shifted. New studies were launched to investigate cognitive abilities in large predators. Scientists began developing more sophisticated ways to observe and document animal behavior in the wild. Grant proposals that might once have been dismissed as too speculative now received serious consideration. The scientific community was beginning to accept that there was much more to learn about animal intelligence and emotion. Thomas found himself at the center of this quiet revolution in wildlife science. But for him, the most profound change was personal. Every time he went into the field now, he looked at animals differently. Every bear he photographed, every predator he tracked, became not just a subject of study, but a potential window into a world of animal consciousness that humans were only beginning to understand. The original bear was never definitively identified. Despite extensive tracking efforts, it seemed to have vanished back into the vast Alaskan wilderness. But in a way, this added to the power of the story. The bear hadn't acted for human recognition or reward. It had made a choice that went against every instinct science had attributed to its species. And in doing so, it had changed how humans would view wildlife forever. 5 years after that fateful morning in the snow, Thomas stood before a packed auditorium at the Global Wildlife Conservation Summit. As he prepared to present his latest research, he reflected on how one bear's actions had transformed not just his life, but the entire field of wildlife science. The changes began slowly at first, then gained unstoppable momentum. Within months of his discovery, wildlife agencies across North America had completely revamped their predator management protocols. The old approach of treating large predators as simple threats to be controlled gave way to more nuanced policies that recognized their complex behaviors and emotional capacities. Thomas's own career had undergone a complete transformation. His research now focused on documenting examples of conscious decision-making in predator species. With new observation techniques and advanced camera systems, his team had collected hundreds of instances of unexpected cooperative behavior between different species. Each discovery added another piece to the growing picture of animal consciousness that challenged traditional scientific assumptions. The most significant changes happened in wildlife protection laws. Governments worldwide began passing what became known as Consciousness Recognition Acts. These laws acknowledged that large predators possessed complex emotional and cognitive abilities that deserve special protection. Penalties for poaching increased dramatically. Habitat protection expanded. Even the language used in wildlife management documents changed, replacing words like specimens and subjects with terms that recognized animals as conscious beings. Public attitude shifts proved even more remarkable. People who had once supported predator control programs now became advocates for coexistence. Communities near wildlife areas developed new approaches to living alongside predators. They created educational programs that taught children about animal consciousness and emotional intelligence. Tourist behaviors in national parks transformed
as people began viewing wildlife through a lens of respect rather than fear or mere curiosity. The scientific ripples spread far beyond wildlife biology. Neurologists started studying animal brain patterns in new ways, looking for evidence of emotional processing in decision-making. Behavioral scientists developed revolutionary theories about the evolution of consciousness. Philosophers engaged in heated debates about the nature of intelligence and emotion in non-human species. The bear's actions had sparked questions that challenged the very foundations of how humans understood their place in the natural world. Conservation efforts experienced an unprecedented surge in both funding and public support. The story of the bear and the moose calf became a symbol of nature's hidden complexity. Documentary filmmakers produced award-winning features about similar incidents of interspecies cooperation. Each new example reinforced the message that humans had barely scratched the surface of understanding animal behavior. Universities created entirely new research departments dedicated to studying animal consciousness. Young scientists flocked to these programs, eager to explore this revolutionary field. The next generation of wildlife researchers approached their work with fresh eyes, free from the limitations of old assumptions about animal behavior. Perhaps most surprisingly, the discovery influenced fields far removed from wildlife biology. Artificial intelligence researchers began studying animal decision-making processes to develop more sophisticated AI systems. Medical researchers explored new approaches to understanding empathy and emotional processing. Even business schools started using the bear story to teach lessons about challenging established paradigms and the importance of observation. Thomas's original photographs had been viewed by millions, displayed in museums, and studied in classrooms worldwide. But more importantly, they had opened countless eyes to possibilities that science had previously dismissed. Children now grew up learning that the natural world was far more complex and wonderful than humans had imagined. The bear itself was never seen again, despite numerous attempts to track and identify it. Yet its legacy lived on in every new discovery about animal consciousness. In every revised wildlife protection law, in every shifted perspective about humanity's relationship with nature. That single act of compassion in the snow had triggered a chain reaction of understanding that continued to expand. As Thomas prepared to share his latest findings with the summit attendees, he thought about how fitting it was that one quiet moment in the Alaskan wilderness had changed everything. The bear had shown that the natural world still held mysteries capable of transforming human understanding. It had proved that sometimes the most profound scientific discoveries came not from complex experiments or advanced technology, but from simply being present to witness the unexpected. The changes continued to unfold. Each year brought new revelations about animal consciousness and behavior. Each study added depth to humanity's understanding of their wild neighbors. That morning in the snow had not just changed how humans viewed bears or predators. It had changed how they viewed life itself, opening their eyes to the possibility that consciousness and compassion existed in forms they had never imagined. 10 years after his discovery, Thomas found himself once again in the Alaskan wilderness. Snow covered the landscape just as it had on that transformative morning, and his camera hung ready at his side. But this time, he wasn't alone. A group of young wildlife researchers accompanied him, eager to learn from the man whose discovery had reshaped their field. As they followed fresh bear tracks in the snow, Thomas shared the story that had changed everything. The students listened intently, their modern research equipment far more advanced than what he had used a decade ago. Their devices could now detect and analyze animal brain patterns in the wild, measure emotional responses, and document complex social interactions. All of this technology existed because one bear had shown the world that animals were capable of so much more than humans had imagined. The most rewarding change for Thomas was seeing how children now learned about wildlife. Gone were the simple predator-prey dynamics he had studied in his youth. Students now learned about animal emotions, cross-species cooperation, and the intricate web of consciousness that connected all living things. The bear's act of compassion had opened a door that could never be closed, leading to a deeper understanding of the natural world. Recent studies had documented thousands of cases of conscious decision-making in wildlife. Bears had been observed sharing fishing spots with wolves during salmon runs. Lions had been seen protecting injured zebras from other predators. Each new discovery reinforced what Thomas had witnessed that snowy morning. Nature operated not just on instinct and survival, but on choices that sometimes defied simple explanation. The scientific paper Thomas had written about his discovery remained the most cited work in modern wildlife biology. But more importantly, it had inspired a generation of researchers to question their assumptions and look deeper into the mysteries of animal consciousness. His photographs hung in museums around the world, reminding viewers that even the wildest creatures were capable of surprising gentleness. As Thomas and his students set up their observation equipment, a familiar sound echoed through the trees. A bear's rumbling call carried across the snow-covered landscape. The students fell silent, their instruments recording every detail. Thomas raised his camera, just as he had done 10 years ago, ready to document whatever new discovery awaited them. The legacy of that morning in the snow lived on, not just in scientific papers and policy changes, but in how humans viewed their place in the natural world. One bear's choice to help another creature had revealed a profound truth: that compassion knew no species barriers, that consciousness flowed through all living things in ways humans were only beginning to understand. Everything had indeed changed, and the world was richer for it. Like a bear's unexpected kindness changed everything. Every story has the power to transform how we see the world. Be part of our growing storytelling community on YouTube by subscribing to Tales That Transform. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell to get weekly stories that challenge what we think we know about life's extraordinary moments.